Hello, and welcome to the History of Philosophy in China by Peter Adamson and Karen Lai, brought to you with the support of the Philosophy Department at King's College London and the LMU in Munich, online at historyofphilosophy.net. Today's episode, Fishing for Complements, Polarities in Taoism. When we say that men are from Mars and women from Venus, we mean that they don't see eye to eye. They can't even agree on the basics. For two people to be chalk and cheese likewise applies to people or views that are antithetical to each other. There's no common ground, and no compromise is possible. The Laozi doesn't mention Mars, Venus, chalk, or, for that matter, cheese, but features many other contrastive pairs: short and long, low and high, behind and in front, dull and brilliant, bent and straight, empty and full, dark and light, cold and hot. These seem straightforwardly oppositional. Bent is the opposite of straight, and short is the opposite of long. But the Laozi isn't talking about such simple cases as a long piece of string compared with a short blade of grass. Rather, it's concerned about the way we use words to make distinctions, thus creating a sense of opposition. Laozi chapter 2 says, "When all the people of the world know beauty as beauty, there arises the recognition of ugliness. When they all know the good as good, there arises the recognition of evil." This passage concerns the constructs we create and perpetuate with words. Words do not merely have a referential function, like when we say, "the sun's out," as a mere factual observation. Often, words express approval and disapproval. That same sentence could be used to blame a teenager for wasting the whole day by refusing to get out of bed. In society, we use language to reinforce conceptions of the beautiful, good, and successful, encouraging people to measure themselves against these standards. The Confucians thus wanted to rectify names in order to promote benevolence and rightness, laying down a measure for our conduct. It's a project the Laozi rejects, not because it refuses to promote any values at all, or because it wants us to discard language entirely. Rather, it objects to the coerciveness of promoting a single standard for everyone and the narrowness of seeing things in only one way. The passage we just cited from chapter 2 thus critiques the dualistic thinking that is intended to guide our lives. Modern-day scholars have taken inspiration from passages like this to offer a more embracing and less divisive approach to life. According to them, the Laozi's treatment of words that seem to be oppositional is intended to express how these pairs are in fact complementary. In some cases, it even seems obvious that we're dealing with complements rather than opposites, as with female and male, worn out and renewed, yielding and firm, giving and grasping, soft and hard, incomplete and complete, and even bad and good. To see how this idea could be developed, let's turn to the work of the philosopher Antonio Cua. He believes that complementarity in the Laozi is aptly illuminated through the characters in Hermann Hesse's book Narcissus and Goldmund. In Hesse's novel, Narcissus is an ascetic thinker, while Goldmund seeks sensual pleasures. At one point in the novel, over a charged conversation, Narcissus characterizes himself as a creature of reason who lives in an arid land and describes Goldmund's life, by contrast, as one within the garden of passion, enjoying the plenitude of life. In the novel, these two ways of life are sometimes seen as conflicting and antagonistic, but Hesse moves beyond such opposition. The novel is not merely about the personalities of its two characters. Rather, they represent two ways of life with different ideals, pursuits, principles, practices, different Taos, as we'd say in Chinese philosophy. The complementarity in their friendship enhances the life of each, which can happen only if neither is seeking to mold the other in their own image. Cua cites a section of the novel in which complementarity is articulated clearly by Narcissus. "It is not our purpose to become each other. It is to recognize each other, to learn and see the other and honor him for what he is, each the other's opposite and complement." Cua's discussion brings out features of complementarity that illuminate the pairs of opposites in the Laozi. Recognizing and embracing the nature of complementarity helps us avoid dogmatism, particularly in thinking that our own Tao is the only acceptable vision for humanity. To understand pairs like female-male, dark-light, and yielding-firm as polarities which complement each other, rather than canceling each other, involves a different attitude toward differences between people or between points of view. Because it doesn't require others to conform to our views in order for us to get along, it may be described as non reductive complementation, a stance that upholds both polarities rather than assuming they are mutually exclusive. According to this way of understanding the relation between each pair of terms, the interplay between the two sits at the heart of Lao Tzu's polarities. For instance, take the pair weak strong. Instead of holding the conventional view that the strong always wins by overcoming the weak, the Lao Tzu suggests that the softest things in the world overcome the hardest things in the world. This is by no means an empty assertion, for there is an example using the symbolism of water, saying that there is nothing softer and weaker than water, and yet there is nothing better for attacking hard and strong things. The weak overcomes the strong, and the soft overcomes the hard. The influential Taoist scholar Chen Guying offers an explanation of this passage that avoids the naive reading that the Lao Tzu is merely promoting weakness. Obviously, when Lao Tzu talks about gentleness and weakness, this has nothing to do with feebleness and powerlessness in the usual sense, but rather has the connotation of something which is incomparably unflinching. This chapter explains the function of gentleness and weakness by means of the example of water. By nature, water tends towards what is lowly and humble. As this example illustrates, thinking about the contrasting pairs as complementary will often require us to think more deeply about what is meant by each member of the pair. Likewise, Antonio Cua's interpretation of the Lao Tzu's polarities prompts a change in attitude that, as he puts it, involves an expansion of intellectual horizon and a restructuring of one's vision of life. This different perspective looks beyond the immediately obvious and takes us over and above what we were taught to see. One passage from the Lao Tzu seems to speak precisely to this issue, focusing on the ways in which our attention is drawn to particular aspects of the world because this is how we have been habituated. 30 spokes are united around the hub to make a wheel, but it is on its non-being that the utility of the carriage depends. Clay is molded to form a utensil, but it is on its non-being that the utility of the utensil depends. Doors and windows are cut out to make a room, but it is on its non-being that the utility of the room depends. In each of these examples, the word that is translated non-being is wu. Wu literally means nothing or non-existent. In the case of the wheel, the spokes are joined around an empty hub into which the vehicle's axle is inserted. A clay bowl is useful to hold things because of the empty space inside it, and a room's utility arises from the place within its walls. However, this passage does not deny that we need the spokes, the clay, or the doors and the windows. These things are codependent with the empty spaces. The passage confounds our expectations regarding what we seek and where we look. Its nuanced point is not that we should cease consideration of what does obviously exist, but that the less obvious non-existent also plays a role. Thinking about the interplay of polarities can also help us to appreciate diversity. Again, Kua makes this point with reference to Hesse's novel, in which Narcissus says to Goldmund, "We are not meant to come together, not any more than sun and moon were meant to come together, or sea and land. We are sun and moon, dear friend, we are sea and land." If indeed some of the Lao Tzu's authors were thinking about the differences between people's choices in life, they would have been offering a pointed criticism against their society's intolerance for different views of human flourishing. A dogged insistence on one particular way of life, a particular Tao, effectively excluded other alternatives. Thus, the Lao Tzu's attention to the dark, lowly, and yielding may be an attempt to speak up for the downtrodden. It seems to place greater weight on what is ignored or omitted from view, including femininity. In the Lao Tzu, there are two distinct polarities, yin, which aligns with femininity, and yang, with masculinity. These two terms originally meant the dark and sunny sides of a hill, respectively. The dark, low, dull, empty, so cold, soft, and yielding fall on the side of yin, and their corresponding opposites or complements with yang. The Lao Tzu's revaluing of gender, which we'll consider in more detail next time, belongs to a general tendency to move away from the image of the wise, sagely elderly man we find in other Chinese texts, like Kongtsu's mini-autobiography from the Analects, which presents him as peaking in virtue at the end of life. In fact, Lao Tzu chapter 55 states, "After all things reach their prime, they begin to grow old, which means being contrary to Tao. Whatever is contrary to Tao will soon perish." Going further still in the direction of valuing youth, it elsewhere proposes the image of an infant, one that has not yet learnt to smile, as embodying Taoist virtues. The infant, who is a symbol of pliancy, is also yielding, unlike the dead, who is hard and firm, or as people sometimes informally and irreverently say, stiff. So far, we've seen how the idea of complementarity might serve as a multi-pronged approach to reject conventionalism, as well as the power of the elite over the people, of men over women, and of the aged over the young. These examples may conjure the idea of fixed groups or classes that are defined in opposition to one another, but of course, the old were young once, and the Taoists are very alive to the idea of changing from one oppositional pole to another, and perhaps back again. An important word here is fan, which appears at several junctures in the Laozi. Fan may be translated as opposite, but it can also have the meaning of reversion, in the sense of returning to some earlier condition. Implicit in this dual meaning of fan is the idea that things progress to a certain phase, upon which they then revert to where they started. A nice example here would be high and low tide. Or we sometimes speak figuratively about waves and crests or of cyclical motion. Laozi chapter 40 states that this is in fact how Tao operates. Reversion is the action of Tao. Commenting on this statement, the aforementioned Chen Guying states, here the word fan is ambiguous. Fan connotes both concepts, opposing and conflicting, as well as circulation and returning. These two concepts are very important in Lao Tzu's philosophy. Everything has its opposite, and it is precisely because of this opposite that things are manifest. He also thinks that things complemented by their opposites is the driving functional power that moves things and affairs to change and develop. It's generally agreed by scholars that fan in the Lao Tzu does have this dual meaning. Implicit in the claim that fan is how Tao operates is the suggestion that it should also be a guiding principle for us, or at least that it is important for us to understand that the progression of events is not always linear. We humans look for an upward swing across a range of undertakings, but that is not always going to happen. Beyond this platitude, the more significant point is that the Lao Tzu views events as returning to some original state. Quite a few of the Lao Tzu's passages refer to such an initial condition, although there is no clear picture of what it consists in. It's a theme that lends itself to more religious interpretations of the Lao Tzu and to the more mystical uses of the text. We find this idea in other religions too, creatures returning to their creator, humans returning to a state of innocence, or cosmic world cycles. It seems that humans have been thinking about cycles pretty much since they invented the wheel. Distinctive to the Lao Tzu's version of return is that in Taoism things are never static. Thinking about opposites and complements is a crucial part of our existence in this world of flux. Consider the famous yin-yang symbol. You surely know it, the one that looks like a black and white tadpole giving each other a hug. The reason the white tadpole shape has a black spot, and vice versa, is that the black and white are never fully in opposition. Furthermore, even though the black and white each occupy equal halves, it's not a straight line that divides the circle, but rather a curving line. This signifies ongoing dynamism between the two. Paradoxically, then, this symbol stands for the transcendence of what we in English call black and white thinking. So the Lao Tzu speaks against an either-or approach to life. Though it often seems to advocate for the yin-aligned characteristics, which had traditionally been disdained, such phenomena as darkness, weakness, and femininity, this should be understood against the ideas of dynamism and flux, which are fundamental to its conception of all things, the Wan Wu, or 10,000 things. Angus Graham, a notable scholar of Chinese intellectual history, emphasizes that Tao's dynamism is fundamental, so we must get beyond any dichotomy between yin and yang. Within the Lao Tzu, he says, reversal is not a switch from preferring A to preferring B, aiming to become weak, soft, below, instead of strong, hard, and above. The reversal smashes the dichotomy of A and B. In preferring to be submissive, the sage does not cease to be oriented towards strength, for he recognizes that surviving by yielding to a rising power is the road to victory over it when its climax is past. Graham's point about orientation toward both polarities is expressed in Lao Tzu chapter 64. A tree as big as a man's embrace grows from a tiny shoot. A tower of 9 stories begins with a heap of earth. The journey of 1,000 li starts from where one stands. But this brings up a concern. Is the Laozi simply advocating a dark way or the way of femininity or of weakness because this path counterintuitively leads to success? Or is it pushing back against the political elite as the Moas were trying to do, but in quite a different way? Could it be speaking on behalf of those who aren't able to do so for themselves? Although it's difficult to detect any clear moral principles within the Laozi, it seems sometimes to be focused on rectifying the inequalities in the socio-political world. Heaven's way is indeed like the bending of a bow. When the string is high, bring it down. When it is low, raise it up. When it is excessive, reduce it. When it is insufficient, supplement it. The way of heaven reduces whatever is excessive and supplements whatever is insufficient. The way of man is different. It reduces the insufficient to offer to the excessive. Who is able to have excess to offer to the world? Only the person of Tao. Therefore, the sage acts, but does not rely on his own ability. He accomplishes his task, but does not claim credit for it. He has no desire to display his excellence. In the end, it's difficult to say what is intended by the Laozi's frequent reminders about polarities, complementation, and reversion. Given that it is the work of many hands, various passages may indeed express the whole range of views we've discussed. But on the whole, it does seem the Laozi is not merely a contrarian text, but was genuinely attempting to right some of the ills of the time. If it tells us to follow the road less traveled, that is because it leads to a worthwhile destination. As we've already mentioned, one of the opposite pairs thematized in the Laozi is that of male and female. By now, we know that when it comes to this text, we should expect the unexpected. So, given the oppressive attitudes towards women that prevailed in ancient China, we should be entirely unsurprised that numerous passages in the Laozi value femininity and prize it above masculinity. Again, though, we need to ask what deeper purpose this serves. Presumably, the point is not just to shock a misogynist audience for the sake of shocking them. In fact, as we'll see next time, the Laozi retains some rather traditional notions about women and men, even as it challenges the contemporary understanding of this particular opposed pair. Join us next time, then, as we get into some Taoist gender bending and ask whether the Laozi bends the genders out of all recognition. Here on The History of Philosophy in China.